I'm Richard Dodd, and you're listening to the Ecology Academy podcast. This is a show where we get to talk and learn about all things ecological, including interviews with top ecologists, both employers and employees, those working with ecologists, and also aspiring and inspiring career-seeking individuals setting out to make a difference. The show aims to provide you with insights, advice, and inspiration to help you succeed and excel as an effective ecologist and to make a real difference to our natural environment. Hi there, and welcome to the Ecology Academy podcast. Joining me today is Richard Crompton from Ecology on Demand. So, good morning, Richard. How are you doing?
Morning, Richard. Great to see you.
Yeah. We just had a little chat about catching up on old time a little bit there. And,
absolutely.
Talking about tech, AI,
yeah,
so forth. So I think it's going to be an interesting conversation today. In terms of, we're going to jump straight in, as I mentioned. So, Richard, just tell us, for those who have not had the pleasure of knowing you for many a year.
The infamy.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So this turns out to be my 26th year, I think, doing professional bat work particularly and ecology work more generally. I've been, I suppose, over that period, I started off doing just bats. I broadened out to do a sort of more wider mammals kind of thing and the more general thing. And obviously when we worked together in the early days of Wildwood, obviously we were running the whole consultancy. When I exited the company, which was 2016. I'm supposed to know that because it was the year my daughter was born, which is kind of the whole point. Again, I went that narrowed back down into being a bat specialist. So just really focusing on what I'm best at, really. And that's kind of what I've always been about. And so life at the moment is primarily Ecology on Demand, which is my consulting service. So as my wife terms it, I'm the Batman's Batman.
Yeah.
So I don't take on standard surveys very, very regularly, perhaps only 2 or 3 sort of what you might term standard jobs a year. I don't really do anything that feeds into planning permission. Most of my work is supporting other consultancies, either on large, complex jobs in a sort of advisory capacity, or a big chunk of what I do is actually holding protected species license, European protected species licenses for various sites. And I mean, typically in the region of sort of 50 to 70 a year, something like that. And they tend to be more interesting sites, usually 3, 4, 5 species plus. I, as of last year, gained the bat earned recognition accreditation from Natural England at level 3. So I'm effectively, without getting into the nitty gritty of that, able to license pretty much any species and any status of roost anywhere in England. So that was a lot of work. It's an interesting process. There's a big conversation to be had about ER. I think it's got its merits, but the process was very hard work. I think I said to the licensing person at Natural England when I finally got there, I said, I've had more enjoyable dentist visits, So wasn't the best of things, but it was still a beta at that point. I actually joined in alpha, but had to pull out for personal reasons. Life just got a bit much, and I was supposed to be an assessor. I did actually go through the training to be an assessor, but the same thing, I had to step back. I couldn't get myself accredited, so I couldn't become an assessor just because life got in the way. And so I finally got through on the beta, and it certainly generated a lot of work. It's a new way of approaching it. I mean, I did my first protected species licenses in 1998 in Wales, number 6 and 7, I think they were, so very early in the whole licensing process when it was actually launched. And very, very different to standard licensing. It's got its merits. It's quicker. Mm-hmm. It does put more emphasis and responsibility on the licensee, on the ecologist, as well as the client. And so that's something I'm still getting my head through. I mean, my first job has completed. So I'm just going through the reporting schedules and things at the moment and realizing there's 1 or 2 things that I'd missed and not done quite in the right way. So I just need different templates and different processes. So that's all good. It's very interesting and takes me far and wide. So I'm probably covering more miles than I have for some years. But it's always nice to go out and meet other ecologists. I just love really that I get to work with ecologists mostly. I've kind of largely cut out that client aspect. There's a few jobs, some that you'll be familiar with. St Fagans Museum in Cardiff, I'm doing a little bit of work with them at the moment. Margam Castle still rumbles on. year after year. There's always something else that's broken there, needs fixing, so it's nice to have those continuity sites. I've picked up a really interesting job in Lincolnshire, which I've been working on for about 6 months now, which is a very interesting one because it's a gentleman who's made his money in business and bought a country estate. And I suppose you'd broadly say he's going down the right rewilding agenda, but it's kind of somewhat wider than that because he's actually looking at the impact on community and employment and stuff like that. And they actually reached out to me. They had an ecology team in place. They've got various properties that have been renovated and stuff like that, which I've had some input into. I'm actually currently holding the license for the mansion that they've got there. Somebody else did the surveys. And actually, I've got a local agent. I've got somebody very close on the ground doing a lot of the supervision work and that sort of stuff, which means that I can genuinely manage it at distance. But the brief they hired me for initially was to make the estate brilliant for bats.
Wow.
I thought somebody was winding me. I thought it might have been you or one of my other friends actually winding me up when I first got the email from this London-based architect firm. And I thought somebody's yanking my chain here. But yeah, they actually hired me on a monthly retainer to make the estate brilliant for bats. So we're literally going back to basics. I mean, they're stripping it back to organic. There's a huge wetland going in, loads of woodland creation and that sort of stuff. Vineyard going in, fascinating stuff. I had a site visit up there, and I have periodic meetings, like quarterly or monthly meetings with the gentleman himself, who's a very interesting character, and he's really hands-on. He's really passionate, and I think he's just all about leaving a legacy.
Yeah.
Which is really exciting. And he's not afraid to put his money where his mouth is. And if he wants something, he'll pay for it. So we're building bat buildings, and we're currently going through the process of concept to create one, if not two, underground hibernacular, because that's something that's missing in the Lincolnshire world. There's not many underground sites just because of the geology. And the underground sites they've got, like bunkers and tunnels, tend to be surprisingly rich. So there's obviously a demand for it, So he's basically open to ideas, and so far everything I've suggested, he goes, brilliant, let's do it, or let's have two. It's very exciting. And actually, BCT are also in conversation. So I actually got a meeting with BCT and him. No relationship to myself. BCT somehow encountered him, or he's encountered them, and so we're kind of all working, together now on some different ideas and piloting some BCT things as well on the estate by the sounds of it. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and then there's a little sideline. I've been running Team Bat, which is my online membership site for a little while now. Probably coming up 2 years, actually, thinking about it. So that was kind of a sort of towards the end of lockdown thing. My wife does loads of online teaching. She's a musician and runs an online harp school. And I just thought, wow, this is good. She enjoys this. She's got a real community. And actually that's because I was not a big fan. I'm not the biggest fan of online, to be honest. It has its place, but I've always been very much face to face. All of my training is always, the USP really has been getting people up close and personal to great bats and the benefit that has to your learning. That's always been kind of my driver. And yes, sort of seeing that my wife really managed to generate community within musicians, and she's got participants from all around the world, a large number in America and Australia and things. And that really actually inspired me that it could be more than perhaps just the often dry anyway, sort of kind of Zoom-based training courses and seminars that we've all sat through, And so that's really what Team Bat's about. You've got two groups, then one that's focused on encouraging and signposting people through their bat license training journey, because it can be quite complicated. Some people fall in with a bat group that just takes them by the hand and gets it done, which is brilliant. A lot more people, particularly in consultancy, often find it harder, certainly those in smaller companies. And so rather than providing the training as such, it's really assisting them through those decisions, what to focus on, where not to get distracted, those things, and then tips and tricks along the way, the equipment that makes a difference, some of the things, even down to sort of attitude and approach, I think is a big part of it. So it's all quite interesting. And then the other group's for professional bat workers. And it's literally a place you can come to bounce ideas off, and we have monthly Q&As and other content, supporting content. So I'm actually working on some automated guides and things at the moment, things to speed up some of the process and some of the stuff we all have to do. all takes time, but it's, some really interesting stuff going on. But it's a really nice place, and a lot of people just want a reality check. I've got this situation, we're doing this. Am I barking up the wrong tree? And I think the feedback I'm getting is people seem to value it. The drop-off rate's very low, so I assume people are enjoying it. So yeah, it seems good. And we started having catch-up days. So we're actually collaborating with Sean and Jim's from BAT's RTS, BAT license training course, just because I think what they're doing is great and it's a really good job. I'm not in a position to do full, complete BAT license training. I'm doing elements of bits and pieces at the moment, but life's not quite in the right place to offer what we used to offer in BAT license training, maybe one day. But I like their course. I like their emphasis. I like the attention and scientific integrity they bring to it as well. And so I was just chatting to Jim one day, and they offer free annual update days to their current and past trainees, which I thought was a really nice idea. No cost events, run cheaply, bring your own lunch, just come along and talk about something that's relevant. And I thought it was a really nice idea. And he said, in fact, we've got one in a few weeks. And I said, what a great idea. I'd love to do this for Team BAT. I want to do face-to-face meetups. Again, free to members or no additional cost to members. Paying members, I suppose is the right way to term it. And so we collaborated with them. They ran a great day in the woods for us, which was good. And then in March, we've got another one, and we're collaborating, which I'm actually running, and it's actually going to be a more lecture-based day as well. So that's nice. So there'll be some more of those, perhaps once or twice a year. No set schedule for those, but really worthwhile, I think, and just trying to fill a gap in the market, and particularly for those people in isolation. There's a lot of one-man bands, a lot of people in small companies where they're the BAT specialist, even though they might not have decades of experience and stuff. And also something I'm working on at the moment is just helping people make the right choices when they want to go freelance as a subcontractor as well, because I think there's a lot of people missing some important things, and there's some decisions that you need to go through. So in the next couple of weeks, there'll be a workshop on that as well. So,
I think there's you're right. I think there's for freelance, I think there's the technical skills, which I think everyone goes in for because that's what they're doing. That's their job. But it certainly is, as you can, testify to, is that there are those other skills. If you are running a business, even if it's just yourself, there are those other things that you cannot get away from. The financial, the administration parts. But you're solely focused upon. I assume you're focused upon the technical side of the freelance work.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's just, I've done it a few times. Obviously, I've been continuously self-employed since 1998, set up various businesses, been a director of various companies, including Bat Conservation Trust, obviously Wildwood and some charities and stuff like that at various points. So you obviously pick up some lessons along the way. And it's very much in common. I don't propose to be any kind of business expert or guru or anything, but I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, and I like to share those in case they might help other people not make them.
Yeah, that's it. Can I just go back to Team BAT? You mentioned about the two sort of tiers there. So in terms of, if I was just starting out my career and I've got a passion, I've got an interest in bats, bat ecology, how can Team BAT help me?
Well, the cluster group. So we've got cluster and colony groups. The cluster group would be the place to start. I think it's, is it £13 or £14 a month, something like that. I think we've got, give or take, 100 members in that, something like that. There's quite a nice sense of community. So it's built on a platform. Well, as most of these things tend to be. So there are kind of chats and groups and stuff like that. So there's quite a lot of interaction from the group. I've got my colleague Emma Turnbull, also helps administrate some of that. And so, for example, there are new snippets and things like that. So, and I try and keep it very focused to relevant stuff. So I'm big, as you know, I'm big on research and staying up to date. That's always been a really important thing for me. And so I try and sift through a lot of the new publications and papers and things like that, and try and cut the crap, cut it right down to the salient points. So if there's new discoveries and things like that, try and put those papers in and a little bit of a summary that goes with them and that sort of thing. And then obviously we run sessions, different jurisdictions in different countries and things like that, about once every 6 or 8 weeks, where they subtly change the rules and it doesn't get announced very widely. So there's often little things. The latest one is, have you actually seen a horseshoe bat in hibernation, and loads of people who are effectively on paper ready for their license, and suddenly they haven't seen one particular species or genus in a certain situation, and they get their applications have been bounced for that, and that sort of stuff. And also there's a real problem with consistency at Natural England. Applications within a couple of days of each other, and one might be mired in 6 or 8 weeks of conversation and discussion. I don't want to use the word argument, but it can feel like that. And one person will just get the license back within 48 hours, So there's a real issue with consistency. So also it's being able to reassure people when actually they have done what they need to do, and just help them go through that sort of process as well. So it's nice. And in fact, the face-to-face meetups have also looked to be proving much more popular for the cluster group members, more of the cluster group members than the colony members. I suppose partly because the colony group members are busier, so they make time to watch the replays or attend the Q&As. But yeah, the cluster group seem very keen to come out and meet each other. So I think there is also that element of networking, and there's no doubt that face-to-face networking is nice. So
yeah,
and then we've carefully timed the next one on that. We'll be able to, if they're staying locally, we'll be able to pop down the road for 4 or 5 hours on Thursday and just have a bit of an update from myself, Sean, Jim, and also my friend Piers Songen from Jersey is going to come and talk about grey long-eared bats for us and the experience. I've had the pleasure of going out to Guernsey last summer and Jersey the summer before, and radio tracking bats on those 2 islands for the last 2 summers. So that's been really exciting, helping them with that project. Just taking in, I've been the license holder for the project to do the actual radio tagging.
Yeah,
and we've had some great success on both islands. We've been terribly lucky. Great fun, really working with the local bat workers on the island, the local bat groups and stuff like that. So that's been very exciting too. Nice to get back to some meaty bat work. That's my first meaty bat work after COVID. Really, it took a bit of a gap with young family as well. My youngest is 5 years old, so getting through COVID with a small baby and getting them into school and all that sort of stuff became primary focus for a little while.
And coming up in March, you have this conference coming up as well. So you keep yourself busy, really. So this
try to
this tech conference is. I know. Well, you tell me about the tech conference. I know it's sold out, but this is on Wednesday, the 5th of March.
That's right. Yes. Well, last year, 2024, we ran Rob Spencer. I think you know Rob, don't you?
Know Rob, yes. Yeah.
And myself. Rob. So Rob was somebody I trained some years ago. He's with an ex-military background. He's been approached. Well, we've been working together on a number of ideas for a while, but he's dead keen to do some courses. He's come to the ecology business as having had other careers in advance, and I think he's brought the experiences he's had from other careers, and he sees opportunities of ways that we can improve and do things better. It's that fresh perspective thing.
Yeah.
And I just love his enthusiasm, and also he's very good because he's very motivated. So he's very good at getting me to do stuff in amongst a busy schedule, which is always
highly organized fellow. Yeah.
Exactly that. Yeah. And so last year we called it Electro-Optics for Ecologists course. And it was using his, for a chunk of time, he was involved in selling technology to the security services, police force and things like that, and training them how to use it. So things like camera systems and that sort of stuff. And so he's got lots of contacts with industry, like Canon and Wex and Thomas Jacks and people like that who produce thermal imaging and video technology. And so his concept was that we'd get as many of these people as possible to actually bring a selection of their products on a course, and we'd have I think we had a group of about 14 or 15 people, and we got very hands-on with the equipment. This was really the idea, because I think a lot of people struggle. You go online and think, well, I need this, or I've been told I've got to use some kind of a night vision aid or something like that. And where do I start? And I think the problem for a lot of people is they don't really understand the process. So we got in some various speakers and exhibitors for this event, and it was very well received. There's certainly some things I might do differently, but we had some very good, very positive feedback from it. And it became very clear to me, looking at the feedback forms and chatting to a few people that attended, that they would definitely do it again. They all said they would, happily attend a course or recommend a course like that again, which was great. And I just thought, we need to get to more people with this. This needs to have a bigger reach. Doing it to another 15 or 20 people next year or in 6 months' time isn't going to cut it. So we thought of the idea of turning it into some kind of a workshop, and actually it became obvious it was effectively a mini conference. We both taught courses at Folly Farm near Bristol a lot in the past. It's a venue we've used a lot over the years. Great food, lovely facilities, very friendly team. And we thought that might be a great place, because also it's got a large strung out network of buildings across the site. And we thought, well, if we run an event, we can put different exhibitors in different places, and they can all have a bit of dark sky associated to a room or a display space where they are. So we've got loads of people. I think we've got 20 people coming to exhibit various things now, which is great. We thought we'd start humbly, learn to crawl before you walk. And so we worked on 50 places, and I did a pre-release to Team Bat over the weekend, and then opened places on the Monday, and it sold out by 5:30 on the Tuesday, which was rather a bit of a shock with those first 50 places. So we went back to Folly and said, look, I think you can accommodate more, can't you? We had to look quite carefully at the number of trade partners that are going to be there. And so we opened up another 25 places, and I put those for sale. I think we were in touch, weren't we?
Yes.
On 2:00 on the Tuesday or something, I think it was, and they sold out in 6 minutes. The 25 places, which was mad. So we can't fit any more in. Basically, the venue's at capacity. So we're kind of going to have to go with what we've got now. But I think that speaks volumes for what's required.
Yeah.
It's a very intensive day, so it's going to start at 10 in the morning and go through basically until you want to go at night. But certainly right through to 8 or 9 p.m. I think. But the purpose being is that we'll have a chunk of lectures, then an opportunity to go and spend some time with the different trade exhibitors, and then another couple of lectures, and then dinner, and then an evening session where you can actually watch some of the devices being used under nighttime conditions, because it's March, it'll be dark fairly early. We did think about running it in the summer. Obviously there'd be more bats then. But I think overall it was important to try and get one in before the survey season starts, in case people want to make new purchasing decisions or be more informed about various options that are available, like analysis and things like that. So that's kind of the emphasis. And then we've got a fire pit and a bar into the evening. So if people want to stay and have a beer, and we'll just gradually wind down as the evening goes on. So it's all going to happen in one day. So there's no compulsory accommodation. Try and keep the costs down a little bit as well. So there's places to stay nearby if people want to stay locally, but equally if they're close enough they can get home, they can zip off that way. So, and I think all things being equal, we may well make this a regular event. We'll try and move it around a bit as well. I think if the demand's there, I think the next stage will be to look at the feedback after this event in March, and also speak to the trade partners, because they're absolutely fundamental to it. I mean, basically they are the event. Sure, there's a few lectures as well, which hopefully will be interesting and useful, but actually it's all about getting hands on with the different types of equipment and really understanding what those options are.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of ourselves, we've been looking at equipment for obviously the past few years. I think I'm just going to schedule this. We'll have a little conversation about there's been there's lots of changes in the past couple of years in terms of what's required of an ecologist undertaking bat surveys and analysis and the reporting side of it. But in terms of in order to us to get to the top of that curve, really, make sure that we do have the technology there, an understanding of it, a familiarity, but also the confidence to use it, because it does tap into that fear. Well, I know when I need it, but if I've got a limited resource in terms of money and time to research an element like those, where am I going to spend that? And I think this conference is absolutely fundamental to building people's trust, understanding that knowledge in order for them to have that confident purchase decision.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a bit of a minefield, and I think it's almost complicated because there are some people in our industry who are very confident with this sort of stuff, particularly people who have done a lot of photography work. Some people have been using different video cameras and things for years and years and years. And I think it all kind of comes easy because the language is all there. But I think some people are kind of, whoa, what's all this, and dealing with those issues of the huge volumes of data and that kind of thing, So, yeah, I think there's some really big challenges. So we're just trying to take the lid off it a little bit. And a lot of these questions are things that if you don't know the right terminology, you don't want to kind of go on an online forum or Facebook or something like that and ask some of these questions, because you don't really know what you're asking. Whereas I think the advantage of actually getting up close to the experts face to face, one-on-one, is that you can instantly portray what your level of knowledge is, and they can pitch their answer specifically to your needs, So you can say, I employ 6 people, or I'm a one-man band and I've got 6 to 8 regular subbies. This is the typical kind of work that we're doing. This is what we're currently using. These are the pain points. This is what I struggle with, And the most common issue I see is that people look at the initial cost associated with purchasing the device, not the ongoing cost of actually using it. And sometimes what you find is that whilst you might be able to buy something that's cheaper initially, the analysis time, which of course is multiplied by every hour of every survey that you do for every year that you own that piece of equipment, is actually the penalty that you pay.
Yeah.
Whereas you might pay 10 or 20 or maybe even 100 times more for that initial piece of equipment, and the analysis time might be an absolute fraction. It might be just 5% or something. So that's one of the things that I think people have to weigh up. And it comes very much down to what size of entity do you have? What backup and resource do you have? For example, IT support and that sort of stuff. Do you have servers, or are you still doing it on individual PCs? And what's your business model? Are you a one-man band? Are you a small company? Are you a larger company? Do you have single office? Do you have multiple offices? Do you have a tech lead? Some of those sorts of ideas, and I think those all play into it. And also, what's the typical thing that you use the equipment for as well? Are you generally doing standard dwellings? Are you typically doing barns? Are you doing a lot of trees? Or are you doing stuff like railway infrastructure and that sort of stuff? Perhaps much bigger things, high-rise buildings and stuff like that. So there's a huge amount of variation in what people typically do. And I think that typical usage is what you want to purchase for. And then also, and some of the exhibitors that we'll have will actually be demonstrating some of their higher options as well, to make it clear that sometimes the most effective thing will be to hire in a different piece of kit that will do the job faster and potentially speed up the analysis, And as we touched on at the beginning, the whole artificial intelligence thing, I think, is going to have a profound impact on that. People grumble to me a lot. Obviously, I'm involved in putting together the various guidelines with BCT, or the survey guidelines, and the eventually forthcoming night vision aid guidelines, or whatever they're going to be called now. And that's rumbling on and taking time, and probably I suspect the recent political announcements will impact that as well, because BCT had to divert resources very rapidly into dealing with the government announcements of just the last week or so on the planning reforms. But people grumble to me a lot about, oh gosh, it takes all this time to do analysis, and I usually say, in 3 years' time you won't be doing it.
Yeah,
you won't need to do it. There'll be a computer that will do it more accurately and faster. Our problem is going to be, I think, certainly smaller businesses managing the volumes of data. But I think actually a lot of it will be streamlined from an analysis perspective.
And I think that's what we're experiencing, and I think we're gearing up for now in terms of, yes, we've got some of the equipment, we still need to get some more equipment, but we've really thought long and hard about, okay, what do we do with this data once we get it? Where we're going to store it, how are we going to, how long do we keep it for? What do we do afterwards? When do we dispose of it? Because, and all those questions, they sound quite easy, but they're not. They're really big questions that we have to ask ourselves, because data storage, for instance, we've invested a lot of time and effort and money into making sure we got the right access to the data, store the data, retrieve, analyze, and all the computing power that takes. That's something that I think, in addition, hopefully, we'll have a conversation at the conference about that, because it's extremely important, because it will influence your purchase decision or hire decisions, and future-proofing or trying to future-proof as much as you can in this time of this age of AI, as much as possible. And then it's those guardrails, I think, in terms of, you mentioned about AI. Yeah. What do you use AI for? What will you not use it for? And then that little bit about training analysis. Yeah, I could also see that in a few years' time, we may not be doing analysis, but
Yeah.
I really do. This is my personal opinion. I think we may need to put in some friction in there, because how do you learn about analysis? How do you learn about backcalls?
Yeah.
I think at some point you're going to go, okay, well, you can use this technology, but not until you do X, Y, Z.
Yes. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Yes. I read an article a little while ago about autonomous cars. And I think the conclusion was that autonomous cars, when all the cars are on the road, are autonomous. It will be a lot safer.
Yeah.
The risk point will be when there's a mix, and the more equal the mix of human informed drivers and AI drivers is actually going to be the worst time of all.
Yeah.
Because it's harder, because every human is different, whereas every AI will basically be the same. They'll be able to predict each other and perhaps even communicate with each other, whereas humans are much more prone to doing random things, sort of thing. So I think it's really interesting. Yeah. I totally agree, and I think one of the challenges within this, and I think it's something, it's great that you speak about this a lot, and I know you've put a lot of effort into understanding the whole AI implication, because it's coming.
Yeah,
I saw somebody on LinkedIn or something the other day saying, "What good is this?" or "What's the point in it?" And I sort of think, well, I'm not going to waste brain power worrying about that, because somebody else is doing it. It's happening at a scale that I can't control, mostly in countries that I can't control, in America and China, and it's happening at 1,000 miles an hour. And I think that the statistic I picked up recently was that in 2024, the most intelligent computers reached the same IQ as the most intelligent people, so about IQ of about 150. And I think Elon is about 145, and I think that kind of sets into perspective. And is it Moore's law? I think it's Moore's law, isn't it, that says computing power roughly doubles every 2 years.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So that's the kind of speed. It's that kind of compound growth that's going to take place with this now. And we just, profound impacts in the whole sort of, in every sector, I think. So yeah, getting our heads around it a little bit, but it's trying not to get left behind, isn't it? I'm at that age where my kids can operate the TV and stuff like that quicker. They can fly around an iPad quicker than I can. I remember watching my son as a toddler using an iPad game, and somehow it got put into Chinese. The language had been changed. It didn't affect his use of it whatsoever. He knew exactly where all the functions were. It didn't matter in the slightest that suddenly all the controls and commands, because he knew where everything was. And I remember being quite struck by that. And there's just that sort of level of familiarity. So I'm trying very hard not to get left behind.
Well, I think it's part of it is about, and it comes down to human conditioning in terms of fears, change. The older you get, the less likely you are, or you prefer change.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that's being open-minded. I think so individuals, companies, organizations, I think, the ones who are open-minded, willing to adapt and adopt new new technology. I think those are the people or individuals and companies that will thrive in this sort of environment. Those who are saying, "Oh, well, I don't want to use it, never going to use it," it's just there's too much risk. Yes, that risk is always in anything we do, but if we don't get on board with this, I think we're going to find that those type of people, those type of organizations, companies are going to fall behind.
I think you're right. Yeah.
I mean, we've got to be sensible about it. Don't get me wrong.
Exactly.
Responsible use. So, what we have this AI policy. What we use it for, but also what we will not use it for. So anyway, we're getting distracted by AI. In terms of the conference, we mentioned also about the BCT guidelines and other guidelines that come in place, the mitigation guidelines and stuff like that. How has that impacted your work? And also, I mean, two questions. Sorry about this. How has it impacted what you do, what you provide, your services? But also maybe a little bit deeper philosophical question in terms of what it means for our sector.
Yeah, it's good questions. Obviously, we're dealing with something like 1,000 pages of new guidance just in the last sort of year or so, between the bat mitigation guidelines, the bat survey guidelines, and the various NVA stuff. So it's quite a lot to get our heads around. There's also things like earned recognition happening within Natural England, and quite a number of the newsletters that have come out from Natural England, obviously making very subtle, or usually quite subtle changes and requirements on our work as well. And it is quite hard to keep on top of all of that. Now, the nice thing for me, just doing bats, is that I can pretty much keep my finger on that pulse.
Yeah.
So I think that helps. So what I find is that a lot of what I'm doing is just sort of reassuring people that, particularly if they're wanting to go for, a paid advice service or something like that with Natural England. In the past, they've actually recently announced that it should be available again. But in the past, if you wanted to actually pay for some time with Natural England to get an opinion on something, you couldn't get it in any case, And actually, I decided to put my rates up at one point and charge the same as Natural England, because people were saying to me, well, I waited 3 months from an answer from an NE, and actually you've just given it to me in 45 minutes, sort of thing. And exactly what you said is what happened. And we got the license exactly as you said, and in fact, there was exactly the question you thought might crop up as well, and that's the benefit of just being able to focus on such a small niche. There's risk involved in it for me from a business perspective, particularly if the government decide to change the law, which is a bit topical at the moment.
Yeah, it is.
But at the same point, it enables me to specialize and mostly have those sorts of answers and experiences at my fingertips in most scenarios. So I kind of have a feel for what sort of things we'll get through. The use of licensing policy 4, for example, when is it okay to use less than standard amounts of survey approach? My experience is licensing policy 4 is very well received. My experience is wholly positive in that regard, is that if you can make a good argument for why you think you understand enough, and that what you're proposing takes into account any risks that may come from gaps in your knowledge, in other words, seasonality or different species or wider types of use or something like that in a roost, then actually licensing policy 4 actually deals with that very well. And Natural England almost seem to enjoy using it. It's almost like, they welcome that extra level of detail that you provide, that extra consideration and reasoning. So that sort of thing, I think, works very well. I mean, with the survey guidelines, it's a mixed bag, isn't it? I don't hesitate in the slightest saying I'd rather we didn't have, which might seem like a strange thing to say for somebody that's been involved in awful editions of the Bat Survey Guidelines, and I wrote chapters in in the first edition back in 2006, 2007. I wrote the chapter on trees and things, and something I found myself saying repeatedly. I'm nervous. I'm starting to sound a bit like a stuck record in some of the review meetings. Is if we just trained people properly, we wouldn't need this.
Yeah.
We wouldn't need this level of detail. But the problem is, and I know this to be true from other training providers as well, is that we don't feel like we're in a very safe place. And it's one of the reasons that I haven't returned to running full-time bat license training course. I mean, over 12 years, we trained over 350 people for a bat license. So we're up there. I suspect some of the other trainers may well overtake us soon, but I've trained a lot of people, so I kind of know what's involved in it. And I'm very proud of the results as well. I meet past trainees, going on to do great things, and that makes me hugely proud. But one of the reasons, a big part of why I've not returned to running bat license training course in its full format is I don't have the confidence that there won't be one of these sudden announcements from particularly Natural England saying we've changed the rules. And then you've got a cohort of trainees that have paid you thousands of pounds, gone through hundreds of hours of training, probably thousands of hours of experience in many cases, and suddenly you can't deliver them what they need. And that's business critical. Those are business critical skills. It's a significant training undertaking. It's a significant training investment from an employer. And so you've got to have that certainty. And I kind of feel that we're not going to overcome this. It feels like a vicious cycle of decline in standards, and I don't feel that we're going to address that until we can get accredited trainers, accredited training, and a formalized assessment system. And you'd kind of have that in every other profession. And I mean, some of the challenges come about, like, for example, there's sort of an expectation that you will have done different types of bat work, and some of those types of bat work you don't really do in consultancy. You would only really do in a bat group situation. And I think there's important questions to be had around, should you have to do voluntary work if what you do is, if you're a professional ecologist as your day job? You know, I would never for a second say that somebody shouldn't join a back group and get that experience. It's brilliant. It's second to none, really. But should it be possible to just have a standard ecology job and get your training as part of that job? And I think it should. So I'm not saying don't get involved. I don't think we should say don't involve back groups. But I think we shouldn't be in a position where we rely on them. And we can't in all areas, because some back groups are reluctant to train consultants for various and good reasons as well. And that's not for me to get into. I'm relaxed about that. But I think it's an important question to have. And I think if we had a formalized training system that was agreed upon, and that either the trainers and or the assessors of that were to an approved standard, I think that would help get through that. So there'd be a specific syllabus. And then also I think we'd wheel out the courses that aren't really delivering what they need to deliver as well, because I always have a concern about the courses that will give a reference in just a short period of time. To me, it takes several days at least to get to know somebody. And I like to work with smaller groups, and I like to see people in very practical, scenarios. So I think it's very challenging, and it may be personal to me, but I think it's very challenging to meet a cohort of people and then send them away with even one signature. I think after just 2 or 3 days, to me, is very challenging. And so I think if that's possible, I think it would be good to get a consensus on that. And I think more likely is that it needs to be a more programmatic, training through different types of experiences, and ideally training with different people. There's no doubt that the more people you train with, the broader your breadth of knowledge. And
I think going back to your point about using of we wouldn't expect. I'm trying to think of an analogy here, but we wouldn't expect a doctor or a nurse to a part of your training will just be voluntary. In order to become a qualified doctor, qualified nurse, you need to spend 6 months, a year volunteering as a doctor, as a nurse.
That's right. A civil engineer. If you said to a civil engineer, right, as part of your professional qualifications, you're going to have to go out 20 times with Terry and Sue from the local back group, and your sign off will be over a cup of tea in their kitchen. Yeah. On a Sunday night. It's kind of preposterous when you put it in those terms. And I'm relaxed that some people have access to do it in that route, because actually some of the back group training is some of the best in the country.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt in that. But it's very inconsistent. And that makes it a bit of a postcode lottery, which I think is very challenging as well.
And it puts pressure on back groups going, okay, well, we got to deliver this training, even though they may reluctantly want to do that. They're just, being a member of a back group myself, and have been for quite a few years, I get enjoyment of going out there, seeing and learning more about bats, not necessarily training for a particular thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And so I think that to my mind is something that would really, really help the business. But that could have a barb in the tail as well, because if you look at something like earned recognition, the application process for that took me, I dread to think how many hours, weeks, days, years. It felt like years. Putting that together as kind of evidencing 25 years of experience was like mad. And, trying to, because it's like, oh yes, well, you say you've done that, but can you give us some documentary proof? And it was like, well, it was like 11 years ago, very, 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 very difficult. And certainly the beta run of earned recognition, I think the assessment was missing the point. There were elements of it that I think were on the money. And I think the overall concept I'm comfortable with. What I'm very nervous about is creating new glass ceilings that people can't penetrate beyond, just because of where they live or because of the people they know. My own training was painful. And I always say it took me 10 years to handle 10 species, because the people that were working with anything other than the bats that you could readily find in your local we were both hanging around in Wales at that sort of period, and that you were kind of readily encountering 5, 6, maybe 7 species or something like that, and occasionally the odd rarity. But the people that were doing the high end work, it was very much a closed shop, and you were very lucky to get invited to join those events, however much you asked and things. And some of that was geography. You know, if you couldn't get down to West Sussex or something to go and take part in one of the, you know, the fabulous projects there, all good stuff. And I don't think it was necessarily malicious. I mean, I think in some cases it was cliquey, but I think not necessarily intentionally so. But I ended up going abroad to get loads of experience, you know. And no, I don't regret that, because that accelerated my own learning and experience hugely by seeing, you know, you suddenly go from having seen 2 barbastels over to seeing 200 in one cluster, sort of thing. And actually you can't put a price on that kind of experience. And actually my recent 2 trips to the Channel Islands that sort of brought it all back, actually, is that it's just so important to keep those skills sharp. And it's great. It's great just to keep that knowledge really up to date and familiar. It's having it right at your fingertips, that kind of, oh yes, that species. Yeah. You know, you see something you've not seen for 2 or 3 years. It's that species. I'm sure it's that species. Let's run through the key and just confirm it. And you know what? Why don't we take some DNA anyway? Because if it is, it's an exciting record. You know, it's that kind of being thorough about it. And also, there used to be this terrible requirement that you had to identify a bat within 2.6 of a second of seeing it. You had to proclaim to everybody gathered what it was in a fraction of a second, which used to drive me mad, because it's so unscientific. You should take your time. You know, there's a reason that we missed that there were 3 pipistrelle species in the UK for many years. There's a reason that it took decades for whiskered and brants to be separated. There's a reason that the alcathoe was missed, you know, and there'll be other species. There are other species here in this country at the moment that are being missed. I think grey long-eared bats have been massively under-recorded. I think DNA has made a huge difference, but I think loads of people are just not confident enough because you don't see them. You know, it's not an abundant bat. It's not a widespread bat. So you don't see them. So I think people very easily miss them. I was working with one client as a site in Dorset, and he'd done a preliminary survey. I think he'd actually done some of the initial emergence surveys, and he said, "Oh, you like this site? We've got, you know, we've picked up horseshoe bat, the serotine, there's long-eareds in there, and that sort of stuff." And I went and looked in this barn, and you know, we found some of these species straight away, and he'd had some DNA done. And I said, "And you've got grey long-eared?" And he said, "No, it's brown long-eared. We've had DNA off it." I said, "No, you've got grey long-eared. That bat there is a grey long-eared." And it was like, "Oh, is it?" No, it was 5 meters up. You know, it was high up on a ridgeboard sort of thing. And actually there were 2 of them. And I took a couple of photographs, and I pinged one to James, and I pinged one to Piers in Jersey. People that see them are more familiar, and they both came back and said, "Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's grey long-eared," you know. So nice to have that. And then we got some more DNA and confirmed it, sort of thing. But it was very easy to overlook it just because the DNA's told you've got brown long-eareds. Oh, you've got grey long-eareds as well. You just didn't sample the right droppings, you know. And it's one of the reasons I really love this multi-species DNA that you can do now. So you can literally go around the whole loft and just pick up a little sample from every pile, 1 or 2 pellets from every pile. And oh, that one looks slightly different. That's a bit of a different colour. Let's pop one of those in as well, and you get the full list for what I think that's brilliant. You know, basically the same price. You know, and I think we're so fortunate.
I think you picked up on something there, actually, Rich, as well. Is the fact that, I mean, as long as we can, you know, I know you know, you didn't point that grey long-eared out to ridicule someone. It was just literally, no, that's, and I think some people, you know, do take things to heart, don't they? Go, "Oh, right, I feel a little bit smaller because, you know, you're questioning my knowledge, my experience." But I think, you know, we do need to be open. And I'd say about this, it's very easy to say, difficult to do with, you know, but be open to challenge, and be open to challenge as well, you know, to challenge someone, because someone says, "Well, we've never had that bat here." Okay, well, okay. If the migration, bats do migrate. Climate change is happening, you know.
Well, I mean, there was that greater mouse-eared bat they found in Dover recently, just a couple of days ago, which is terribly exciting. And I said, "Did anybody manage to get some DNA off it?" And somebody messaged me privately, nobody associated with the record, somebody from another country as it happens, and sort of said, "You're not serious, are you? It's obviously a greater mouse-eared bat." And I said, "Well, you might be comfortable to say that." And I said, "I'm totally content that that's what it is. But who's to say it's not blithy, which looks very similar? who's to say it's not some kind of weird subspecies that actually exists in the UK? Because we know the Myotis group's got the potential to be separated far more and genetically. And in any case, why do we not have some DNA? Because we might be able to get some lineage information, find out, is it actually, is it closely related to, for example, the nearest colony in France, which I know has been quite well studied, and it was kind of, I don't think that was a stupid thing to say. If there happened to have been a dropping, a large chunky dropping, because it's going to be big, greater horseshoe, bigger than a greater horseshoe or a noctule dropping, I would have collected it and I'd have kept it. And I'd have said, well, let's have this and find out which lab's going to do the most useful work with it. But I found it very intriguing that somebody was like kind of almost ridiculing me for suggesting that we needed the DNA. It's not because I've got any concerns that it's not a greater mouse-eared bat, because loads of very experienced people, were quite content with that. I was intrigued, you see, that it had a much cleaner face. They're kind of warty, dirty things almost looking, and I've handled, I don't know, several hundred, maybe 500 or 600 greater mouse-eareds over the course of my career. But equally, I know some people have handled many more than that. So, as I say, I'm not concerned about the identification of that specific bat, but it's kind of, what else can we learn from this? This is a very important record. This is the first record outside of Sussex for 50 years or something. We should get all the information that we can get, because it might be the start of something. And then there's all the all the issues like viruses and stuff like that. There's an apparent problem, for example, with rabies in serotine bats in the southern counties of England at the moment, and the bat carers are getting significant numbers of bats coming into care with rabies and dying from rabies, So there's a PR thing to be done here. We need to manage this carefully. We also need to carefully inform bat workers, because I'm running a serotine project in Cardiff at the moment, and I was chatting to people, on that, and just saying, this is a species we need to be careful with, for a number of reasons. We typically tend to wear nitrile gloves when we're doing bat work. A serotine bat will very easily bite through a nitrile glove. Okay. And if it's a species that we know is capable of long journeys, because it's a big, powerful bat, or we should at least assume that, then we need to take a high level of precaution. Has everybody got up to date inoculations for rabies, that sort of stuff? And then at some point, we're going to have to start having conversations with homeowners and stuff like that in Dorset and Devon and, Hampshire, perhaps. You've got serotine bats. There's a risk if your cat encounters one of these on the ground and has an interaction with this bat, there's a risk that your bat might catch rabies. And if your cat catches rabies, then, children, homeowners, all this sort of stuff, so there's some of the issues that a lot of the European countries deal with regularly that we haven't had to really face up to very much, that maybe we have to start talking about. So
really,
it's important. Yeah, and wear gloves. Always wear gloves.
Always wear gloves. That's take-home message. Well, talking of take-home messages, I mean, you've been very generous with your time, Richard. And I think really, and I say we've taken a while to get to here, but I can definitely see you coming back for a part two. Really, there's some.
Well, why not?
Absolutely, there's some gems here that we need to carry on with, and maybe talk about the conference, the sort of a breakdown of the conference in March here. But just before we go, first of all, I mean, how can people get in contact with you, if they want to?
So I've got a terrible, outdated website. I mean, social media probably is the easiest answer. If you're on social media, you won't struggle to find me on the various industry specific groups on Facebook or on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active, partly because I enjoy helping people, but partly also because that does help me promote my other businesses. People see, I think, if they can see that you're, I hate the term thought leader, but if you're in there thinking about things, sharing opinions and views and solutions, I think that makes you attractive when people need help, which is obviously the purpose of Ecology on Demand, is helping people out of sticky situations and things that they need a bit of assistance with. So Ecology on Demand obviously has a website, which is easy enough to find. And Team Bat is just teambat.co.uk for anybody that wants to join that. And I'm not so good at, this, Richard, I'm not so good at the administration and the promotion and all of those sorts of things, but I kind of muddle along in my own way. And I do now have Emma also helping me with some of the administration and stuff like that, which makes a big difference as well. So I can always be messaged. The thing I always say to people is never ring me up.
Never ring
Telephone is by far the worst way to contact me.
Yeah.
If it's urgent, email and text message will always get me best of all, but preferably email. I do trundle through my emails pretty well.
But when you do get hold of Richard, he is amazing. So that I think that's it. Persevere is my
yes, exactly. Yeah, and
that's it.
Yeah, lot of my work's reactive. That's part of the challenge. So I find that a week, however carefully I plan it, can be thrown asunder very quickly. So that's part of the challenge. And people will always appreciate waiting a few days when they then are the emergency that I will drop everything for and work till 5 a.m. completing something or working on a solution for them, which I do probably 2 or 3 times a month. I put in the midnight oil for a client when something really matters. So that's the way I work.
Excellent. So it's Ecology on Demand, Team BAT. Contact Richard on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And one thing I'll take away is you are the Batman of bat people, should I say? Yeah, there we go. The bat world. Yeah, so fantastic. I really appreciate your time. And I'm sure we'll be in contact again soon, but and look forward to seeing you in March at this conference. But
we'll see you there, and perhaps we have to have a catch up afterwards and talk about some of the findings and the outcomes from that.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, Richard, thank you so much for joining me today on the Ecology Academy podcast.
Pleasure. It's been really nice to catch up.
If you enjoy our show and want to help, then please click on the subscribe button and rate us on your favourite podcast player, as that's how you can inspire ecologists in the making, help retain great talent, and provide insights of our industry to a much wider audience of why ecology really does matter. Thank you. And remember, learning is a lifelong endeavour, so stay curious, be adventurous, and build bridges for others to cross.